And this is Chris White here at WMPG. Let's talk as we do of a Monday evening. Jessica, our program director, dropped in a little earlier with this special announcement. Said, announce if you'd like, and I'd like. Southern Maine Astronomers is a nonprofit community of professionals and amateurs dedicated to public outreach and education in the area of astronomy. The keynote speaker for their February meeting will be Sasha Derry, the CEO of Blue Shift Aerospace, a Brunswick-based startup designing a new line of rockets around a bio-derived fuel. Learn about Blue Shifts and the fast-growing world of aerospace in Maine. The public is invited February 7th at 7 p.m. in room 165 of the Science Building here at USM. So that's coming right up this Thursday. And biofuel rockets. That probably is a great lead-in to tonight's show. As always, the goal of Let's Talk is to get interesting people from the community to come on in and chat. And as always, anything controversial, upsetting, political, or whatever that any of us have to say is exclusively the opinion of the person speaking, and in no way reflects the views of station management, licensee, other staff members, the university, or your mother. So, I know that's not official, but we don't have official ones anymore because everything is deregulated, at least to a point. And my guest this evening is... Who are you?
I'll check my wallet.
Yeah. Would you please?
Bob Giuliana.
That's right.
What a coincidence.
It's Bob Giuliana. Or Robert. You like Bob?
Bob.
And I'm being a bit of a ham. I do this show for a decade, and I think we've had a video shot like 3 times, and 2 of them have been this week and last week. So, we're having fun here. So, you and I connected through that marvelous social media that shall not be named that now controls the universe, after that guy over there was on the program with his, when the Peace, Love, and Zoo film that Mr. Groff did was premiering.
Reggie Groff.
That's right.
Here he is.
And so, you have a connection with Reggie, and we kind of bounced around on social media a bit. And you just seem like a really cool guy who's led a very intriguing life. So, do tell, what are you doing here in Portland town?
Well, currently, I'm writing and directing a documentary with Reg on the changes that are occurring in Portland. Very dynamic moment. So that's my connection with...
Yeah.
Well, one of my connections with Reg, and that's what I'm doing these days, basically.
And with that project, how far back are you looking? Is it?
It's basically it's current.
Okay.
However, sometimes that implies something historical about the urban renewal during the '60s, etc. Still has a great impact on what's happening today. So we reference that. But it's about what's happening now. But history is undeniable, and so that's where Reggie and I we go back a long way. We shared. We were in the same building. He had a business in the building. I did as well. We got to know each other a little bit, and at one point, more recently, I asked him his video transfer operation. I asked him if he'd transfer a 16 millimeter film, which I'd made in the 60s, to digital.
Okay.
And he did. And he called me and said, I saw that, and I'd like to do a film on Portland based on your film. You might want to get involved. And we talked, and so I joined him.
And so what was that film? So you did a film
Back in 62, 1962, just to be clear about that.
Okay. Now what was that film?
It was called Main Street, and it was one of the few early objections, pushbacks against urban renewal and what it was doing to our citizens and some of our nice communities. I was working at GBH in Boston, WGBH, public television, then called educational television. But I saw they were tearing down the West End, and I heard, which was a very nice community.
Oh, in
Boston.
Boston,
right.
The Boston West
Between
End.
the, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Between, it was located, still is, located between the North Station and the river, Charles River.
Right.
Perfect for making money with condos. Anyway, it was a very nice community. It was being torn down. I heard about that. I looked at it, and they said the next is the North End. North End's going next. And I said, that is not right. And I very quickly learned how to make films and enrolled a couple of people at the station at GBH, an audio man and a cameraman. And we got together and made a film.
And you would have been, what, 3 years old then?
I was 7. All right, it's out of the bag. I'm old. But anyway.
That must have been fairly early, though. I was actually
in the 60s.
Yeah, so
early 60s.
So you must have been what, early 20s then? Or?
Yeah, I think I just gotten out of BU.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. I'm just. It's an interesting time. For all kinds of reasons.
Oh, it was.
Early days of television, early days of this, that, and the other.
Well, it was a time when the federal government was granting all kinds of funds to cities to build highways through the cities. It was all about the automobile. The suburbs were taking over, and they tried to turn the cities into suburbs, I guess. Anyway, it was a real mess. And so I got upset about it, made the film, and it cost $500 to make the 16
good money in those days.
Well, it was a stretch, but fortunately GBH had equipment. And there was a competition in public television, national, and they granted $500 to each station that came up with an idea that made sense relative to their own community. So I submitted that. They said, fine, here's $500. We made the film, and it took first place in the national competition, and it just raised hell in the city because people didn't know that people were actually being hurt by the tearing down of buildings. It's a very emotional film. It's all about what's happening to the folks who are being pushed out of there and given nothing for money and not being helped to relocate.
And so we leap ahead, and you contact Reggie to get it digitalized.
That's quite a leap. Yes.
And he sees it and says,
Yeah, there's a symbiosis here, whatever that's a big word. So, yes. And so we started making, writing and producing this. We have a lot of it in the can. Still doing it. And during this, which brings me here tonight, during our relationship, Reggie started hearing some of my drivel, some of my old man talk about what happened in the past. And he said, that's fascinating. I've got to record this. And so I didn't think that was a very good idea, but Reggie is as persistent as a toothache. And he finally got me 3 times that we've sat down and he's interviewed me, and I've just talked into the camera. With some of my adventures, we actually went to Boston to shoot the West End as it stands today and into the North End, all of that. And he's shooting right now. I don't know if this thing's going to end up in his... Whatever.
Well, when you and I got together for coffee to just chat about you coming on the show, I joked we'd spend 25 minutes name dropping because,
Yes.
you started out in early 60s GBH in television, and that's
Historic.
those are heady times.
Oh, that was an incredible time.
And then I have to go, okay, so what were you doing? Where were you in the late 60s, early 70s? What happened by the end, so where were you at that stage? Were you
Well,
still a GBH or
I left
doing
GBH
film or?
just a sketch of
Yeah.
the trail. I went from GBH. I was hired by Westinghouse to go to Baltimore and make a series of films and television shows on the Inner Harbor development.
Okay.
From there, and I was there for about a year and a half at WJZ. After about a year and a half, I was lured to go to Africa to make a film for the Emperor Haile Selassie.
Whoa.
Whiplash.
Whiplash indeed.
So this is a
Wait.
quickie. So from there, and we're just going to do a quick. Then from there, I went back to the U.S. Came back. I went to New York. I went to GB, back to Boston for a short time. Then I went to New York to Baked Apple. I was hired by Merv Griffin Productions, and I worked on the Merv Griffin show for 3.5 years. Simultaneously, I was doing specials, weekends with Streisand and others, which name dropping. Here we go.
Yeah. Now we're on to it. The name dropping part. This is so much fun.
Anyway, from there, I burned out on making films. It was the 60s by then, and it was rock and roll, sex and drugs, and my friends were becoming famous or dying from something or other. And I was involved in a film startup. I left the Griffin show to start a film division for the company, which actually leased me to Merv Production. Anyway, it's complicated. So I left Merv, started a film division, Paradigm Films, which was extraordinarily successful. The two best camera sound men in the world were in Manhattan at the time, and I was fortunate enough to bring them into the company. And they made Woodstock and all the rest of it. Just incredible. Mike Wadley, particularly, and Larry Johnson, who's the young man I brought into the film business, trained him, and ended up getting an Academy Award nomination, as did Mike. Anyway, so I left New York. I went to Mexico, the west coast of Mexico, for a while. Made a film for DuPont. Left there, got married, came up to Maine. I've been here ever since, and what I've done in Maine is absurd. I mean, I had a lobster business up in Georgetown. Then started smoking mussels, introduced mussels to this country. They had never, not mussels, smoked mussels had never been produced in this country. And did seaweed by the ton, and now that's a commodity. Moved to Portland, started was co-owner of the Portland Harbor Sailing Center.
Okay.
And did a special for the symphony here, fundraising special, with David Ogden Stiers. You remember him from MASH?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
And more.
If you're just tuning in, it's another edition of Let's Talk here on WMPG. I'm Chris White. Bob Giuliana is my guest tonight, and as we semi-jokingly said at the beginning of the show, it's a name-dropping kind of show this evening. What fascinates me, in part because I self-identify, is within the arts or politics or almost anything, there are the stars, the name brands, the big acts, whatever, and yet they ultimately are the pointy top of the pyramid of the people that create their, what has them on stage. I mean, I go back, odd, bing, 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 and some more name dropping is I'm an art guy, visual arts, museums, galleries, and again, kind of the behind the scenes kind of thing. One of my artist pal clients is Marge Minkin. Her son, Mike Gordon, is bass player for Fish. And so, when they hit a certain point, their audience is kind of going, "Whoa, those guys are rich now. They're making all this money." And as Marge goes, "Yeah, they can finally afford dental insurance because they've got 50 people on staff year round, and maybe a couple of hundred people anytime they're out on the road." And some of those people within the industry are rock stars. Yeah. And so you obviously you're kind of part of that culture within, Merv Griffin. He relies on those cameramen that only tech geeks will wait until the end of the credits.
Merv was, Merv was well aware of that. He was a very generous man. He was what you saw on the screen is who he was. He was very gentle, very generous, sweet guy, and he was maybe the hardest working man I've ever seen. He worked 6 days a week from 5 in the morning until 10 at night. I mean, amazing. I
grew up watching his show.
Oh, you did? Well, I was when he was doing it out of New York. When I wasn't there when he went to the West Coast, which is where he was from.
Well, I'm thinking, I was a kid, so it would have been, the 60s,
I was middle 60s, early middle 60s is when I was with
a
the show.
bit in. Okay, so that would have been the
shots
the
of him and Arthur Treacher and all that downstage stuff. That was my camera one.
That was. I always enjoyed the mix of guests, and now that I'm an old geezer and have spent enough time around enough of this stuff, I realize how, especially at that time, with the type of equipment that was available then and so on and so forth, boy, that was a heck of an effort of the team that you rarely thought about that made that
it was
kind of
wonderful.
great
I was so fortunate to stumble into that.
But
I'm so grateful that I that I fell into television. I just volunteered at GBH and walked in the door. And back in those days, you could do that.
So with all of that background from there to we might get back to Haile Selassie, and so on. But all of that experience, and you bounced to Maine.
Yeah.
And okay. I gotta ask, what was the brand you came in with the smoked mussels? What?
It is Georgetown Wharf. I was up in Georgetown at Bay Point. I had a wharf, at least a wharf, at the mouth of the Kennebec, and I bought a cottage on the mouth of the Sheepscot. So I had those two locations. And we were surrounded with mussels.
Right.
You sold a few bushels in the weekend and the holidays to Boston and New York. Otherwise, they were just sitting. And so I had smoked mussels in Europe when I was over there. And I said, why not? So I started experimenting. And, excuse me, they were delicious.
Oh, yeah.
They were delicious, but I couldn't sell them. I had them across the country through a distributor out of Boston. And they couldn't sell them. The chefs said they're ugly. They're delicious. No one knows what they are. I don't want to buy them. So it went, I went out of business with that. Des Fitzgerald, Duck Trap, smoked foods and so forth, big time.
Right.
He used to buy them from me for his table.
Okay.
And eventually, when I went out of that business, he went into it big time with Great Eastern Mussel. They were related.
Okay.
And they.
Well, that's why I asked. My family had. Basically, I had family up in Camden from the early 70s on and up in the Lincolnville area, so I was aware of Duck Trap when when they were a startup, and it would have been around the same time.
He and his wife had a house there up in the hills, and they had a pond. And they were raising trout. That was how he started.
Right.
And eventually he started smoking the trout to get an extra buck out of it. And
You got to dry them and break them up really small.
and roll them out. Boom. Rim shot. But anyway, that's I don't know where we were, but
Well, Bob Giuliana is my guest tonight on Let's Talk here. We're palavering about just a fascinating life, and here you are. And so let's devote the last 7-8 minutes, whatever we have here, to this project that you're working on now about change, because I've been in in the Portland area for 20 years, and you look around and just go, wait a second, what?
Yes.
Where did that come from? And Dave Wade has been on the program, bringing in some of the captains, looking at the working waterfront issue, and sort of my introduction, when I was first back in Portland, was the 90s, early 90s. People were, tumbleweeds rolling down Congress Street, and the city went out and got consultants in to talk about how can we revive the town, and so on and so forth. And we're getting a message. Maybe ask how many times he nearly killed.
He was nearly.
How many?
I was nearly killed. I say.
Yeah, well, I could see where that would be that's a good question. If he's asking that question, I want to know. So how many times were you nearly killed making movies?
Well, it wasn't always making movies, but in Ethiopia, when I was making that film for Selassie, the short version is we were traveling from Addis Ababa, the capital, up through Eritrea, which at the time was controlled by Ethiopia, but they were at war. Anyway, we drove through Rift Valley. That's a whole other story. The Rift Valley can accommodate 8 Grand Canyons. That's how big it is.
Wow.
And it's so deep that it gets hot down there because you're getting closer to the core of the earth. The temperature rises as you travel down.
Whoa.
And just going through anyway, get up there to the road to Asmara in Eritrea. The week before we traveled, a young Italian couple were honeymooning. They were killed on that road by the Shiftas, who were the Eritreans. So we were on that road, and there were 4 of us in the Land Rover heading up, and here comes a group of, whoops. Yeah, anyway, there's a group of men on horses with rifles, and they have the bandoliers across their chests, the whole thing. And they came at us, and they surrounded us, and we just kept driving, and we knew we were in trouble. They were not smiling. One of them had a walkie-talkie, and he was communicating with somebody elsewhere. And eventually, they went off the road and went down into a valley and left us. And I think they didn't do us because we had stainless steel cases in the car, and I think they couldn't quite figure out.
They weren't entirely sure how dangerous you were.
Some of us were Westerners, obviously,
right.
And some were Ethiopians, pretty obviously. And I think they couldn't quite figure out. Anyway, that was a very close call, actually. Later the next day, we were up camping up on a hill overlooking Lake Tana. Hot during the night. I got out of the tent. I dragged my sleeping bag out on the thing and on the grass and fell asleep and woke up with noises around me. I had a flashlight. I turned the flashlight on, and there were hyenas on both sides of me,
Lord.
panting. Panting woke me up. And somehow or other, I just took my sleeping bag and the flashlight and made it back to the tent and zipped it up.
You won't find hyenas here in Maine.
Not yet.
You don't know. No,
Not yet.
Not yet. You know.
Anyway, that was
There might
much-
be an angry moose or two, but
nothing worse than an angry moose. But anyway, then in
that's a couple.
yeah, and that was the more dangerous than the guys with the rifles, I think. But in Mexico, at some point, I was down there, and the Mexicans don't like us for good reason. But I was down there making a film, and I made friends with a local guy who was. We drove. He said, "Let's go down to the bay outside of Vallarta." I was looking at some land, and I'm making this very short, and it's a little awkward. But anyway, we pull into this village and stop for a beer, sit at this table, and a bunch of local guys came over and sat around us. And my friend Hernando said, "Bob, don't speak English," because he knew this was a hostile situation. So they figured me out anyway. They knew I was a gringo before very long. Anyway, some guy comes in with riding side saddle on his horse, and this amazing young man, dressed in beautiful leather outfit, shirt, pants, hat, all matching. And he's riding side saddle on this horse. He just cool as can be. He spots me, comes over, he sits beside, puts his arm around me, and he said, "As an honor, we're going to let you fight the bull today." It was the Bay of the Flags. It was a holiday. He's going to let me fight. So Fernando said, "Bob, let's go over there and take a leak." So we went up behind the little shed, and he kicks a wall down.
And
said,
you escaped.
And we ran to the Jeep, and his brother John.
Well, there's at least twice that you managed to slip sideways away.
The reason I got out of there is his brother John, who was with us, stood up at the table, pulled out a .45, and chilled all those guys who were getting up to.
My goodness.
Anyway, that's the short version.
And now you're here in Portland.
I'm not feeling the slightest bit threatened, Chris. I'd like to tell you that.
The mean streets of Portland. So we've got maybe another 3 minutes.
Shall I go through my list of names?
Yeah, sure. We were going to make this. I tell you what. Let me take a quick look at the list, and let me ask you about somebody. Let me ask you about somebody.
How about that one?
Frank Zappa. That stands out. Okay, sure. What's your Frank Zappa story?
Well,
obviously it's got to be the short version, but
we lived in the same neighborhood in Greenwich Village. One day I'm sitting in I pull up to the lights on 8th Avenue, and I have this beautiful white Porsche, and I pull up, and then this guy on a motorcycle pulls up beside me to the right of me, and it's Zappa. And he looks at me, and he looks at the car, and he looks at me, and he looks at the car. And when the light changed, I thought, well, it's all right, he wants to race. So I stomped it, and he, being on my right, he pulled ahead and swung left in front of me, and I almost nailed him. And we both would have been on the front page.
Oh, my goodness. My goodness.
He had no helmet, hair flowing. He was just being Frank Zappa, and I scared the hell out of me. I put both feet on the brakes, on the brake pedal.
Well, did you meet after and have a drink?
N-O-E. No, that was my. It was brief, but it was nearly. It nearly was significant. Yeah.
Oh, let's see who.
Eleanor
else?
Roosevelt.
Eleanor Roosevelt. My dad actually met Eleanor Roosevelt.
Well, she fed me cake on her 75th birthday. There's a picture, I think the Boston Globe took it. We were doing a show with her at Brandeis, and it was her 75th birthday, and the Globe came in.
Liz Taylor. Okay, Liz Taylor.
You're a name dropper. Oh, that's my list.
That's your list.
Puerto Vallarta. Burton had produced a film called The Night of the Iguana there. Right. I was down there making a film for DuPont. They had a new fabric, and they sent us down there with
industrial.
Well, beautiful fabrics, and they sent us down there with 8 beautiful models, and we had to shoot them over the rocks. And so anyway, but I loved it. I sent for my sweetheart. She came down. We had an apartment, and right across, up the street a little bit, on the same level, 3rd floor, on the balcony was Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor and his kids. And one day, I was up on the hill with our Yorkshire Terrier, looking at some land up on the hill, and here comes a very pretty lady with her Yorkshire Terrier, and we talked.
So you bonded with Liz Taylor over Yorkies.
At absolute truth, we spoke for quite a while. It was it was very nice. She never said, "Gee, aren't you Bob Giuliana?" and I didn't say, "Gee, aren't you Liz Taylor?" We were both.
And gee, you know, I'm not Chris White.
It was very brief, but that's name dropping. You don't have to. I mean,
We're going to have, I like to put, 4 to 6 months between return visits, but we're going to have you back on again at some point in the not too distant future, because what Let's Talk is all about is interesting people doing and chatting about something that we hope you found entertaining, amusing, and perhaps educational. And I'm hoping for more beer.
Alright, how much time we got? A minute on yours?